Murder Sheet did an interview with Mike Thomas. He's the candidate that's running for the new sheriff of Delphi. Here are some of the clips of that interview that I thought were interesting.
There's a new sheriff in town, or at least there will be soon. Carroll County Sheriff Tobe Lezenbys, who has been running the investigation into the murders of Liberty German and Abigail Williams, cannot run for the office again because of term limit restrictions.
It is inevitable that the way the Delphi murder investigation has been handled, or mishandled, will become an issue in this race. The man who wins the election will end up having a tremendous impact on the future of this case. Considering that, we decided to reach out to candidate Mike Thomas. He gave us his thoughts on what's been done in the investigation and what he would do differently if he became the man in charge. So to start off, just tell us a bit about yourself, how you came to the department, what you do. Give us a bit of that bio, if you don't mind.
Okay. Back in 1997, I started working at the Carroll County Sheriff's Department as a jail officer. And it was in 1999 when I put in for as a deputy. And then I was awarded a deputy's position. I was on for about 3 or 4 years, and I became a canine officer. And I did that for 9 years. And then I became the chief deputy when Sheriff Tobe Lezenbys took over in, 2014. And so I've been chief deputy since then. And now I'm running for sheriff.
Tell us a bit about how you kind of came to decide that you wanted to, throw your hat in the race for sheriff.
Yeah, so when I became chief deputy, it was always something, that you have in the back of your mind. I feel that there's a need and a desire to be more transparent and be more beneficial to the county, to see things get done in a positive light. And there's a lot of things that over the years it's just been customary to do as far as running the sheriff's department. It's kind of like, well, we've always done it that way, we're going to do it. And I've worked on probably 5 different part-time police departments, and seen how, so I've had a variety of different counties and different aspects of seeing how things are run in other areas. And just training, for instance, I think training needs to be better. And so I would like to see those kind of adjustments be made to our department. And so that's what's making me want to run for the sheriff's department.
And for people who are not from or familiar with Carroll County, what can you tell us about the county and, this jurisdiction that we're talking about, and, kind of what the needs are that, the sheriff's department sort of serves here?
I think there needs to be a little bit more involvement with our deputies, with the community. And so that we have because we do have a vast area of land that we have to carry or cover. And the sheriff's department is the busiest agency out of the other 2 departments. And then you got some of the smaller towns that have town marshals. But the sheriff's department calls outnumber theirs by quite a bit. And so we've also got a lot of water through our area. So we used to have a water rescue team. We don't have that anymore. And there's, I don't know if any of the deputies are interested in it or not. I never was. But so there are some special needs that we need to address. But the crime here it's picking up. And a lot of that is due from outside people moving in. A lot of them are coming from other cities like Chicago, Detroit, and areas. And they're moving into Kokomo, and they're moving into Lafayette and some other cities around us that are much larger. But then they come through our county, and we're having a lot of crime that way as well. So there's a lot of just different type of things that's making this county have to grow a lot quicker than what we're accustomed to. It's always been kind of a sleepy county, I guess what you'd say, one that not a lot would happen. Not that nothing happens, but compared to the other counties. But here recently, we're having more violent crime that we've not seen before.
Is a lot of that violence and rising crime, does it have to do with drugs, or is it a mix across the board?
I think it's a little bit of mixed. Drugs is always a problem in any area, but we are seeing a lot of different types of drugs that we never used to. When I first started, the main drugs were marijuana and cocaine, and then it switched to methamphetamine, and then here lately, heroin, and then of course you got your prescription drugs, and now with fentanyl and everything else, we're seeing a variety of it. And we have what's called the Hoosier Heartland now that's going through our county, a dual multi-lane highway. And so that's increased a lot of the traffic from the major cities. They can drive up through Detroit down to Lafayette and so forth like that. It's much easier to gain access to.
And I guess, moving to the Delphi murders, and maybe a new approach is needed.
I think that you've got to go out and you've got to beat the streets. It's kind of like old police work. A lot of times, what's happened is, with the newer technology out there that's come in, we tend to get lazy as police officers, and we expect that this new technology, we'll run a computer or we'll run somebody's phone or something along those lines, and that'll give us what we need. And I think in this case, just not what's happened. And you need to go out and you really need to just pound the area where you're from. And there might be people out there that, they just don't want to say anything, or they just don't feel what they have is of any value at all. So they're not going to call the tip line, or they're not going to, say something to somebody. So I think you need to be more direct and go out and knock and talk to everybody, even if it means knocking on every door in Delphi.
In terms of sort of your experience being in the department, can you shed any insight about what the Carroll County Sheriff's role has been?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we were originally capable of dealing with the high crimes of those type nature in the beginning, because we just recently, we've had detectives before, but they typically just do your normal battery and your normal type thefts and stuff like that. And what's happened is, when you get a crime like these two, you just don't have, you might have a lot of experience with the several people that's in the room. So you can say, well, this person's got 20 years on, this person's got, 15 on, and this person's got 10 years on, and they add all those together. It sounds like you've got a lot of law experience there. But when reality hits, you don't have a lot of law experience as far as those type of crimes. And I've been to classes, and I've learned that when you have crimes like this, you need to bring in somebody that's really got solid experience in this type of crime, that can make sure that you put your detectives with, so that they're led in the right direction and made so that, because if not, you just don't become Sherlock Holmes right off the bat. You don't learn this kind of stuff. It's something that it takes years of experience, and sometimes it'll even baffle the experts, that come in. And so you really need to hit the ground running with solid people that know what they are doing in an aspect like this type of crime.
In terms of Delphi in particular, one thing that we've talked about in the past is sort of like the tip line and sort of soliciting tips with the sketches. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, and whether or not that was a help or a hindrance to the investigation.
In the beginning, I didn't know any more than anybody else did, and that's what I strived to learn from this ordeal. And they can certainly be helpful if everything works correctly. But I think in this case, I think it was a big hindrance in many ways, because what you got was people not just calling from anywhere in the United States, but we've had calls from people around the world in reference to this case. And when you got to take back and look into each and everything, that really slows down the progress of anything that you might have. And it tends to complicate the case much, much more.
I'm wondering, in terms of, concrete changes that if you were elected sheriff, you would make that would pertain to Delphi, the Delphi case and the Flora case. You mentioned kind of ensuring that people are equipped to kind of, as you said, knock on doors in the neighborhood and really hit the ground running. So
Right.
What sort of things would you seek to implement?
Well, I'd like to bring in some detectives that actually know what type of crime they're dealing with. That I think what you need is experienced interrogators, or not interrogating, but interrogating's not really the right word. More like when you interview a person and you're talking to them, somebody that is very good at what they do. And because if you put somebody in there that has limited experience, they may be telling you something and you may not understand what they're saying, and it may just go right out over your head. And I think they need to have the same people doing that over time, instead of well, this guy found this guy, so we're letting him interview him, as opposed to somebody that's maybe knows a little more about how to interview somebody and see the signs and so forth. And in our county, we don't do that as often as what a lot of bigger places do.
Right.
So I think if you get a group of good, solid detectives with some of the other ones, and my department probably don't like to hear me say that, but the experience, you can't just gain experience like that. It takes years of experience to learn that kind of stuff, and that's why a lot of times it goes back to these people that this sounds dumb. So the way humans behave, there's a lot of predictability in the way certain humans behave. Would you agree?
Right, especially in crime.
Especially in crimes. And so when you look at certain aspects of the crime, and you've done this over time and time, for instance, people will, when we go to a theft, somebody's broke into a house, and a lot of times the female will say, well, I put it in my underwear and bra drawer. And we're like, yeah, that's typically where they look. And why is that? Or they look at the back of the closet. It's because the criminals already know that those are probably the places where they're going to be. So there's certain behaviors that people do that help predict what's going to happen, I think, in a crime like this. And that's when criminal profiling and all that comes into play.
Are there any insights you can give us and our audience about the role of the Carroll County Sheriff's Office compared to the Indiana State Police and Delphi Police when it comes to the Delphi case in particular? Is one group kind of calling most of the shots, or is it a collaborative effort? I'm just curious if you had any insight on that.
I would love to be able to answer that question, but I don't have the answer for that because I'm not part of that investigation. And I've been kept out of that loop. So I don't really know which one's supposed to be. Our agency's the lead agency. The state police obviously has the ability to do all the testing and forensics and stuff like that, and they have the ability to go all over the state a little bit better than what we can. It should be a collaborative effort together, but sometimes I don't know if that is happening or not.
Right, and it sounds like they're keeping it pretty tight-lipped even within the departments that are investigating.
Yes, absolutely. It's not something that this county was ever prepared for. As much as you try to prepare for stuff like this, it's not one that we thought we'd see in our area. I think people are still just shocked by the ordeal that it could happen, and not just happen in Carroll County, but happen so quickly, and for this community, it flipped it upside down.
One thing, I believe the Carroll County comment and other press sources have been critical that not too much information has been released about the investigation. Do you have any feelings about that?
Yes, I think my personal feeling is I think that there could be a little more given out as far as what's being done, a little bit more transparency in that area. In my opinion, I think that there could be some more stuff released that, might jog somebody's memory or make them think, okay, yeah, I'm on the right track.
In terms of the latest news that's come out of that's come out with the Delphi case regarding this kind of person of interest figure in the case, Kagan Anthony Klein, it's sort of kind of typical of the Delphi investigation where, police authorities come out with, some kind of information that seems super important, whether it's a sketch or this name of this person. And then sort of, there's a huge amount of discussion about it, and then it sort of dies down again. And I'm just curious, do you have any insight on, what's going on with this latest round of, with this Klein fellow? Or,
No, that's pretty locked down. I don't have much info on that for whatever reason, and part of the reason is when this investigation took off, I just didn't see eye to eye with the sheriff on it. And which, that's fine. We all have our own opinions, but I didn't agree with a lot of the things that were being done or being said. And that's just my opinion. But with the Klein thing, I'm not sure what road they're going down. I know a lot of people think it has to do with catfishing. But that would take a big jump for somebody that catfishes to commit murder like this. So, but I don't have any of the information that they have on it, so I can't say one way or another.
You mentioned that you have some disagreements about the sheriff on this investigation. Can you give us some examples of some of those disagreements you've had?
No, I really can't because it would go into the investigation part of it. Other than I think there's possibility of other things that could have been done that wasn't done, or vice versa. My opinion is you're 5 years into this, and what outcome have you gotten so far?
A lot of people are saying that same exact thing, that it's been 5 years, it's still not solved. So what's going on? There's kind of that sense I feel around Delphi in particular. Right.
When you look at the crime in itself, typically you don't have as much evidence as we have. You don't have a video, you don't have a sound, so that alone would make you think that this thing shouldn't have lasted as long as it has. But for some reason, it has. And I think that we need to rethink why that is. And what's the reason that it's going through? You can have the people go back and look over the same information again, but if they're not really seeing anything different, they may not come up with the right conclusion. And I don't, you could send them back 3 times and see the same thing. I don't think it's going to do much good because they've already got it in their head that, this is what's going on. And I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but doing the same thing over and expecting a different outcome. You know what I'm saying? So at some point, when do you say, okay, enough, well, we got to try something different?
Online, you'll have a lot of speculation about Delphi in particular. And one thing that's often speculated is that police had some sort of grand scheme in terms of releasing 2 sketches, and, that they were trying to coax out the murderer or something with their second press conference with the younger sketch. I'm just curious, like, have you heard anything around that? Or, I mean, as somebody who works in the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, what did you make about that sort of second sketch being released in the way it was?
Actually, I'm quite baffled by it. I don't know why they come up with that second sketch. I typically, from what I understand, talking to some of the people that I've talked to, you typically don't want to do that because it kind of muddies the water. So I don't know if they had somebody in mind or if that's what the witnesses come up with. I just don't know for sure.
And I'm curious, yeah, it was pretty baffling. I'll say that's my opinion, at least, too.
Yeah.
I mean,
because in my opinion, and this is just as my opinion, and you don't know necessarily the video, but to me, it doesn't appear to be the same person in the second sketch. So I've heard that from a lot of people, and I feel the same way, but I don't know what information they have that makes them think that it could have been the second sketch.
Right. They have not made that super clear.
No, and I think that's part of the problem and part of the frustration with the public is they beg for your help or they ask for your help, and then they give them a little bit, but then they get nothing in return. And I think that's very frustrating, and that's why the public, not just the Delphi area, but throughout the country that's involved in this case, they're very frustrated by that.
Absolutely. I'm going back a little bit, back to February 2017. Did you, when the girls initially disappeared at the Monon High Trail in Delphi, were you at all involved in any of those early searches or coordinations or anything like that?
No, actually, I got off duty and I came home, and all of a sudden my Facebook Messenger started lighting up asking me, if they needed people to help search, and I had no clue what they were talking about. I didn't really understand the impact of it till I went to work the next morning and went to the fire station where they had the command center set up, and that's when I pretty much got involved in it. I didn't really understand what was going on that night before.
And then I imagine once it became apparent that it was a homicide, then maybe things got a little more closed-lipped pretty quickly.
Yeah, it did. And a lot of it was strategic planning, trying to figure out how we're going to handle this, where we're going to handle it at, because the sheriff's department's a small department. We just don't have the room or the ability to hold a lot of people or places. So, I guess, computers, that sort of thing that you need for all this information that's going to come in. So that's when some decisions were made to go to the Delphi Police Department at first. And we worked out of there for several weeks. And then we went over to the REMC building, which was a much better place to do it at. And because the amount of information that came in, whether it was good or bad, it certainly was a lot of people wanting to help out, or people thinking that it's somebody they knew. But again, the problem is so many people that were turning in tips. It hampered a lot, because a lot of times it wasn't good information, or it was just somebody that wanted to get an ex-husband in trouble, or an ex-boyfriend, or I don't know if it's him or not, but it might be, so I'm going to turn him in.
Right, and that leaves a lot to sift through for investigators.
And it does. And, there comes a point where you get burnt out, because you're just seeing the same things over and over again, and trying to, some people not believing that their tip is being taken seriously, and they'll call it in. And then if it doesn't do that, then they'll have somebody call it in for them. And then so you get this repetitive tip that keeps coming in. And each time you got to go through, and the time and the amount of work that's required to try to clear that tip out of there, it can be exhausting.
am curious, with the tips, is that predominantly Delphi police handling them, ISP handling them, or Carroll County handling them?
Well, again, I'm not sure now. Initially, it was everybody that was involved, whether it was the FBI, the state police, the sheriff's department, or Delphi, or many of the other agencies that came in to help. And so it was a group effort in the beginning. And right now, I don't know if it's our guys doing most of it, or if a lot of times if it's somebody from another state that we have to look into, sometimes we'll call that agency and have them look into it, or the FBI or the state police, depending where it's at.
This is one thing that we've heard from people online, just again rampantly speculating with not much actual evidence or insight, but oftentimes people say that the police know who did it, they just can't prove it. And I guess I know you're not directly involved with the investigation, but did you have any sort of thoughts about rumors to that effect?
Yeah, so there's a lot of that's going on, and some people firmly believe for whatever reason it's this person, and so they keep sending it in there. And we've looked at that person, and maybe we've checked their alibis and their work status, make sure they were at work and stuff. But some people just don't believe that. They're sold on that it's that person, and it makes it very difficult to try to stop the conspiracy theories or the police know who it is, and stuff like that. You may think you have a good idea who it is, but it still takes proof. And without the proof, you don't have much.
One of the other candidates in the race is Tony Liggett. According to Thomas, Liggett is the detective in charge of the investigation into the Delphi murders. That has the potential to cause some friction in the race.
I'm sure as it gets closer, it's going to heat up in that respect of the homicide, because I think as far as myself and what the lead detective in the case is now, I don't necessarily agree with everything that they say they're doing to solve the case. But every time you stir up more media, then it brings more of these tips in. And if the tip is there, it's either been overlooked. I can't imagine that out of all those tips that it's just not there, or they're not seeing it. One of the two. I can't say for sure, but I think you need to go back through with some experienced detectives, look at everything, start from the crime scene, from the night that it took place, and go back through it, hair by hair, if you have to. And something's being missed somewhere. I'm a firm believer in that. I just don't think that it hasn't not come to them yet. I think it's there. It just hasn't come to them yet, or they don't recognize it.
Have there been any rumors or things stated as fact that are just completely myths about the Delphi case that you've sort of seen and been like, that's not true?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that goes on. A lot of things that people say, and a lot of people will say, well, I got a good source, a law enforcement officer saying that this is what happened, and then I'll read it and I'll be like, no, that's not true. That happens a lot. I think everybody wants to make everybody believe that they have that one specific piece of information that makes them feel credible or whatever. And from what I've seen, that's just not happening. And what they're putting out there, and then they're saying this comes from a very reliable source, or law enforcement personnel that's involved in the case, and that's just not happening. The guys that are involved in the case are very tight-lipped. They're not saying anything, and so these people that are going out there and saying this stuff, it seems like it's just an idea that somebody's come up with, or an accusation that somebody's made. And how rumors get going, it seems like it builds as it goes. And that's another problem that we have, is a lot of speculation or a lot of people saying it's this and that, and it's just not true.
Are there any specific rumors that you'd be able to or willing to like sort of shoot down right here, or are you going to hold off for now?
Well, I'll probably hold off because what I'm hearing right now, there's a ton of them, so I can't even tell you what would even come to mind right at the moment. And I don't want to say something that might jeopardize the case on accident, so I'm not going to say necessarily. But I think people need to use a little caution when they hear somebody online that says, well, this comes from a very reliable source, or this comes from somebody in a law enforcement case, that more than likely it's not true. The way I look at it now is, obviously it's been across the nation, and yes, you still come across people that don't know about it, but there seems to be an awful lot of people out there that do know about the Abby Libby case. And with the media presence that's going there, I think you need it, and you hope that it'll build something with your case. But at the same time, you got to be willing to give a little bit. People want to help. They have this dire desire to solve this case, along with the investigators, along with myself and everybody else involved. And but sometimes that can be detrimental, because when you go out there and you think you got this case going, and all these people are looking at it, and then they start throwing out different things, and that's more stuff you got to try to weed through, or try to protect the information that you've got, sort of things. It's very hard to do sometimes to balance that out.
One aspect of the communication strategy that has been criticized to an extent is that one of the lead spokespersons on the investigation seems to be Doug Carter of the Indiana State Police, and some people seem to find some of the things he said to be confusing. Do you think it makes sense for the state police to be the lead spokesperson on a Carroll County case?
Yeah, I don't know. I've struggled with that myself, is why they do it. The state police typically, they have such a broader territory than what we do, and so they come across where they have people that speak to the press more often. And our small department, that just doesn't happen very much, unless it's, say, a bad accident happened and the local news agency comes and asks questions about the accident and stuff. So for a case like ours, it was something that we were just not used to. And I think with them taking the lead on that, that's how they've become in that role.
I grew up in a place where they told you what to chase, told you how to run the race. Every move was on the page, but I didn't like their way. Had to fight and misbehave, had to find a way to change, had to leave to find my way.